What's up? Welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today we're going to talk about Wolves. This is an Apple Plus film, has audio description done by Pixelogic Media, narrated by Laura Post. And it stars Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Amy Ryan's in this. So we got Oscar nominees all up in the house, all up in the hizzle. And Jon Watts is directing this. Jon Watts of Spider-Man fame. He is part of the reason why the newest iteration of Spider-Man works as well as it does. And also little indie films like Cop Car. So how did he do with Wolves? And why didn't Apple Plus give this a theatrical release? I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question. It's not perfect. It's not like my favorite film of the year, but I definitely was watching this going, of all of the films Apple released this year, this one probably leans itself most to being theatrical released. And this is the one film that they couldn't get a theatrical release for. Like, even The Instigators had a small theatrical release. I don't think Wolves had one at all. I think Wolves went straight to Apple Plus. Meanwhile, like, Argylle had like a wide theatrical release that didn't work out. Somebody should have watched Argylle before they did that and just told Apple, been like, I don't know about this, man. Wolves isn't that bad. It's actually pretty good. I liked it. It's about two fixers, they're rival fixers, and they get hired separately by two separate parties to help fix this job. There's a woman, something unfortunate has happened in her hotel room. And she originally was told, you know, if anything ever happens, call this number. So she calls that number and it's George Clooney. And meanwhile, little does she know, but there's another interested party that suite actually has like a camera attached to it. And those people have called Brad Pitt. And these characters never have names, so they're always like who they're hired by is how they're labeled the whole film. So we don't ever get to know what their names are, which I thought was really interesting because at first I was like, well, what are we doing here? I was like, is hiding their names really a big point? But then I realized they have no names. And then by the time you get to the end of the film, I was like, well, I'm definitely not going to drag anybody on this because they don't have names. And even if they said a name, it probably wouldn't be a real one. These are the kind of characters where you think they would introduce yourselves and be like, I'm Daniel. And then the next scene, they're like, I'm Brian. You know, you're like, what is your name? You know, like they would just change their name all the time because that anonymity is part of their job. So best way to describe it is the way that it's described in the audio description, where it's who hired them, so to speak. So, but for purposes of this review, I'm just going to say George Clooney and Brad Pitt. So they are rivals and they have to clean up this act, which basically there's a woman who was found, she was trying to have an affair with a younger guy in this hotel room, and he jumped off the bed and into a mirror and then died. I don't know. It all sounds, we weren't there for that. And the movie opens with a scream. So get ready for a jump scare. Like a crash or something like that. Like literally, like the beginning of the movie is a loud noise. And which I actually did catch me off guard. I was like, that's probably the one time this year, except for, I think Smile 2 comes out this year. So that's going to happen. But I think that's the one jump scare that worked. It's not even that type of film. But yeah, start off with the film with a loud noise. I'll be like, oh shit, what the, you know. But they, you know, argue back and forth. It's like they know each other exists, but neither one of them. And they talk about how in their profession they have to be lone wolves and just the way that they operate, because of the kind of stuff that they know, and they don't want anybody else to know, and their clients don't want anybody to know these things. So like, it's out of the ordinary for them to team up. They don't really like each other. Their banter back and forth is really good because these guys have been on screen together multiple times. So Clooney and Pitt have excellent chemistry together on screen, and that's what carries the film. Amy Ryan is fun for the little bit of time that she's there. I liked her. I thought she was good. I'm trying not to spoil anything too big, so that's really all I can talk about, because at a certain point, some stuff changes and the movie evolves. I thought it was, I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it, which is kind of how I felt about The Instigators. I was like, there's stuff here that I like, but I don't love it. So they're both good films. There was stuff about about wolves though, where I thought we introduced concepts that we didn't resolve, and questions that were asked, even asked openly by the characters, that weren't resolved. And that was kind of what I wanted to see, is that they would talk about things and they'd be like, well, isn't that interesting? Or what about this? Or what about this thing? Or, you know, and there were things that I thought about too. I was like, oh, well, what if we did this? Or what if it was this? And it always felt like it was going to go somewhere, but it kind of went like the most obvious direction, which kind of made me think, why did Clooney and Pitt pick this? And then I remember reading articles about how they wanted to make sequels to this. So I think when they're thinking about it from a franchise perspective, but then still, I choose the more interesting path. There was sort of a question, for example, that's pretty obvious, because Clooney is the one that's hired by the lady in the room, whereas Pitt is the one that's hired by the lady who has a camera, which when you think about it, it's creepy. By the way, when you enter a hotel room, if you don't see the camera in the corner, that's on you. Like, I mean, in the audio description, Pitt just like literally like points up at the corner and they're like, camera. You know what I'm saying? Like how did they not know there was a camera there? You know, food for thought. But yeah, Clooney, like, he wants to go back. He's like, well, how do I know this isn't a whole big setup to get me on camera? It's like, how do you know that? That's a very valid thing. But then they kind of let that concept die. And I was like, yeah, who puts a camera in there? And he's like, how does he know that it isn't a whole setup? I mean, he never met the client before. So you're taking all of this at face value. And then later on, I was thinking about the kid. I was like, well, what if the kid was, I thought it would be really interesting also if the kid was what was the special thing. You know what I'm saying? Is there anything special about the kid that we don't know? Is he like the son of a senator or something like that? Because I thought that would be interesting. Like, we don't know anything about this kid, but she is very adamant that he's not a prostitute. And I felt like they didn't really go anywhere with that either. Like, he just some kid. That's exactly what it was. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like this film could have been more interesting. It could have gone deeper, and considering the talent involved, I wanted a little bit more from it. But overall, I was entertained, engaged. Are there better films this year? Absolutely. Is this the best thing that Apple's produced? No, because I liked Fancy Dance a lot. But this is second to Fancy Dance for me in terms of their like scripted film content. I mean, Blitz is probably going to knock everything out of the water, but maybe not. Who knows? But this is like way better than Argyle, and I think it's a little bit better than The Instigators. So I haven't seen Fly Me to the Moon yet, but from everything that I've heard, I have a feeling I will like Wolves more than Fly Me to the Moon. Just, I'm having that vibe just already. So audio description, I thought Laura Post did a really good job. She usually doesn't pick up bad scripts. I have a feeling she probably has gotten a script or two and been like, this doesn't feel good to me, you know? Because I rarely ever hear Laura Post on something where I'm like, well, that was just a complete waste of time. I've seen her do things where I'm like, well, I disagree with that choice. Like, this will be like the 27th time I brought up the fact that America Ferrera should have had a name in Barbie instead of just being constantly referred to either by her job or her title as a mother. She never has a name. The whole film, by the way, in case you're just now hearing me say this and didn't realize that, she's never named in the movie. She has a name, it's Gloria. I know what her name is, but they never use it because of some outdated rule in audio description that made no sense for that film. At a certain point, you have to go, well, the rule doesn't make any sense, and her name isn't a spoiler, so we're not going to use it. We're not going to go by that really weird, bizarre, dumbass rule. But Wolves, when they started not using the names, I was like, okay, why aren't we using names? And then I kind of realized why we weren't, and I was like, that makes sense. So here I was like, that's fine. They probably wouldn't tell us what their real names are anyway, and if there are sequels to this film, they're probably going to use different names. You know what I'm saying? They would probably introduce themselves as one thing, and then later on they'd be something else. So, yeah, it's best to keep them this way in general, because their whole life is clandestine. So, Wolves. Should you watch it? Yeah, probably. Apple Plus could probably use the boost. I think this is a totally watchable film. Jon Watts doesn't really make bad movies yet, so far, that I've seen. So he makes okay movies, but he doesn't make bad movies. Like, well, that was okay. But he's also made some really good movies. That Spider-Man Far From Home, I thought was really good. So I'm going to give Wolves a B+. I thought for the most part it was good. It could have done more. Could have like closed up a couple things and gotten into the A territory, made itself a little bit more interesting. But it seems to be pretty happy with just being somewhat predictable, generic, and entertaining. And that's fine. This is just a typical thing. It feels like it's a theatrical release. It feels like it's just made for mass consumption. And it's not meant to necessarily be like an awards contender or anything like that. So it's so weird that it wasn't released theatrically, because it feels like the kind of thing that would have been eaten up by audiences. And that's the first time I can say that about anything that Apple's done this year. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I will see you guys on the other side.